everyone, I'm Gavin Seal. I'm a filmmaker from Montreal. So off the top, the word that you'll hear me use that I've found immediately more accessible to me as an artist who also has a production company, yada, yada, yada. But as an artist, the idea of like a business model is already terrifying and complicated, and revenue and expenses, all this rhetoric and jargon already really complicated. So to start, the framework I found more useful is a money model. And this is actually quite simple if you think of it this way. It's on page 2. It's basically money in and money out. Pretty simple, right? Like when you break it down that way, what are revenues, what are expenses? We're not gonna get into that today. But I've found when I'm really terrified about like looking at my bank account, the question is, where is money coming in? And then where is money going out? The films are money out. So I think all of us, we don't really struggle with the money out. What we struggle with is the money in. And so I invite you to take a few seconds to jot down on page 2 what you already identify as, the money out's easy, so let's start with that as a warm-up. What's your money out? If you're a filmmaker, maybe it's a short film you're working on, maybe it's a feature. If you're a dancer, if you are a musician, maybe it's some of those. And then go ahead and move on to money in. Essentially, right now, what is paying your bills? So take a second to do that. Sometimes, I think people who have heard me talk before, I talk in books. So the book that has really helped me with this is called Thinking in Bets. It's written by Annie Duke, who was a former professional poker player. Thinking in Bets for me is time. We all have the same capacity in terms of how many hours in a day. So the question is always, how are you going to spend your time? And instead of return on investment, which is money in, how much money do you make, I like to think of my return on energy, because there are activities that drain me, and there are activities that like beep, 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 like you have those meetings, and they're so great, and you leave the meeting, and you're like, oh, I have more energy now. Those are the things you want to lean into, because I think especially as artists, the reality is we might get a big paycheck, but we're still not really fulfilled, we're not satisfied. Often we're drained, and then we don't have the energy to actually work on the work that we want to be doing. So that's my challenge, and I found Thinking in Bets, considering how much time I have, writing the 3 things I need to do today that are gonna move the needle, the 3 things that are the to-don'ts, which I know I'm gonna get distracted by, which might be social media, it might be something for revenue generation, but I actually can't do it today because the SODEC deadline's May 6th, and today I actually have to work on this presentation. So 3 to-dos, 3 to-don'ts. Thinking in Bets is the book that I'd recommend you pick up if you want to learn more about that. So page 1, your finite and infinite games, also comes from another book I really like called, surprise, surprise, Finite and Infinite Games. And essentially, this is again, 2 buckets. What is your infinite game? Infinite games are games where the goal is to keep playing. Obviously, I want to be a filmmaker for the rest of my life. That is the infinite game. I want to be in a relationship with my partner for the rest of my life. When we get into an argument, I remind myself, winning the game means staying in the relationship, not winning the argument. Same with friends like Samir. This is his first day working for my company. We met through one of our entrepreneurship workshops, and the goal of the game is to continue the relationship, not at the expense of an individual moment or outcome. Whereas finite games help me compartmentalize the revenue generation and to ensure that if I am giving my time for a finite game, such as making money, I need to make sure that that money can then be reinvested in my infinite game, which is film. The way I like to think of this is, if I am going to sell an hour of my life, I need to be charging 4 times more than what I will need to spend an hour on my art. So I'm always thinking, how do I make money to make art? And the basic metric is like 4x. So this leads me to the next book I want to recommend called Blue Ocean Strategy. This is actually how I met YES Montreal. In 2019, I got rejected from the short list of Telefilm's Talent to Watch, curled up in a ball, cried, fell asleep at 3 in the afternoon, and decided I was going to quit the industry. Fortunately, I met YES, and the way I remember it, this probably wasn't what they said, was they said, how much would you want to make to give up on your dreams? And I was like, $100,000. And they were like, great, glad you have goals. So we set out on that mission, and within 5 months, I had a job paying $95,000 running a creative studio at Mattel. That was 2019. So 2020, the pandemic hit, And within a year, I was burnt out. And the reality of that job was, yes, I had the money to live, but the reality is, I'm sure everyone here can identify with, was I was burnt out within a year because I just hated sitting in meetings. I was so drained. And sitting in traffic on the Décarie to go to Saint Laurent, sit in meetings, and then they could, I think, feel that I was waning, so they started giving me promotion, the golden handcuffs. I had less time to make movies. I was getting into management, more meetings, and so I started looking for another job. I got a job at Shopify. It was remote by default. The pandemic had ended, and I was able to have a more flexible schedule, and Shopify was an environment where I could actually make enough money and have the flexibility and autonomy to work on films separately. So the point with Blue Ocean Strategy, what the book generally advises, or my key takeaway, is that question of how can you leverage your skills into an industry where your skills are respected because you have lower competition. Because up until that, I was making $300 a day working in post-production, working in VFX, working on set. I got to work on some great shows, but there was no real ladder up because there was a cap based on union regulation. So no matter how much better I got, how much more productive, how much smarter, I was capped by the industry. Whereas in organizations like Mattel and Shopify, I could demonstrate my impact and they would pay me more for the same skills. Which also brings me to the concept of meta skills. Skills are things you can actively do, usually technical, like rolling on a camera, but the meta skill is learning how to do those types of skills. So for example, a challenge I'm having right now is finding people who know how to use project management software like Asana. The point isn't whether you can use Asana or Trello or 5PM or Basecamp. The point is, are you thinking in a way that suggests you are a structural engineer and you're looking to build processes so that when we do season 2 of a show, we just right-click, duplicate, and we have every single task from Monday to Friday, including delivery to Technicolor and the entire dependency sequence. So continue working on those meta skills, and those will be highly valuable, unfortunately not in the film and TV industry because of the union challenge, which is if you really excel and you learn and you develop a growth mindset, you'll be capped by the industry standard, a term that I hate because I don't want to be industry standard, I want to be above industry standard. So when people say this is the industry standard, that's cool, it doesn't sound like we're going to be able to work together, I'm going to find a new legal advisor. So the idea of product market fit. This is a business term that is really kind of easy if you're in goods, services. The idea of, does your customer want what you have? So for example, if someone has, and there's the idea of painkillers and vitamins, and the challenge as artists is really what we're selling is vitamins. This is cultural product that will make the world a better place, but what you really want to be selling, especially for money, is painkillers. Someone has a headache, here is the Tylenol. That's completely different than someone wants to get out of the house or learn something, which documentary should I learn or should I go on TikTok, right? So the idea of painkillers and vitamins I've found really useful in generating revenue streams based on selling things people will pay for, 4x, so I spend more time on art. And the challenge is product market fit, which I imagine a lot of us here in this room living in Quebec can identify with, especially when it comes to government organizations. Essentially what someone like me as a brown Anglophone has as a challenge is I don't have product market fit with Quebec. My stories are not deemed Quebecois in the monolithic way that the cultural organizations are mandated to execute. That's fine. I've found success through outside of Quebec, to be honest. I've gotten money for films now across Canada, in the US. I've attended labs at Berlin, I've been to Cannes, and I still have not received a penny from Calc or Sodak for production. So I don't have product market fit here. That's okay, because what I do have is self-awareness, which is Quebec is not gonna fund my films. Now that I know this, I can find people who do want to fund my films. Maybe or maybe not, you have product market fit with these funders, but your stories are worth telling. The challenge will be finding the strategic partners who recognize that value and are a better partner to execute. The last book I'll recommend, probably, unless a question triggers another book, Ikigai. It's another great book I love. It's this Venn diagram. What you love, which might be making films, The challenge is, what can you be paid for? Which for me is usually not making films. And then there's what the world needs, and then what you're good at. For example, what you love and what the world needs might be a mission, but it might not be a profession or a vocation. What you love and what you're good at might be a passion, maybe a profession. But ideally, what I've found useful is compartmentalizing what the world needs and that they know they need, so they'll buy the Tylenol, with what you can be paid for. That's how I make money. And then what I love, what I'm increasingly getting better at, is my passion. So to go to that last page, the 3 pillars, I'll highlight that I haven't actually got Google checked this, so feel free to call me out in the Q&A. But my understanding is the core root of the word passion is not so much about love, it's what are you willing to suffer for? And I am willing to suffer to make films. But Jerry Seinfeld says pain is knowledge rushing in. And so if you are willing to suffer for your work, your art, it will be painful, but you're gonna learn and you're gonna grow and get better. And so those are the things that I'd suggest you write into that category, is what are the things that you're willing to suffer for? And then remind yourself, this sucks, but this is knowledge rushing in. That's what you're experiencing emotionally as pain. And then you can put money, which is obviously how are you gonna pay the rent? It's essential, and hopefully this will help you continue to negotiate that relationship. I don't believe that artists should starve. And the challenge with working in the industry is, as we discussed, there are limitations to how much money you can make. So I actually advocate and advise that artists find other revenue generation models in industries and with partners or for clients that actually are like, whoa, we don't have anyone here who does what you're capable of doing. Here's a ton of money and a lot of flexibility and autonomy. And then you're like, thanks for the money, you do the job, and you still have the energy to do other things, because that client, my clients are so great. Like, because they don't really have anyone that can do content marketing like I can, they're really, like, I'll say grateful, but like, they're just kind and respectful, which I don't often find when I'm working at a big production company in post-production, making $300 a day. So that's another benefit of that. And then finally, learning. In my company, the way I think about it is passion is our art. We only do films. We're not interested in TV or verticals. I have no interest in nurturing social media addiction. So we're not getting into that game. We're not passionate about it. We're not willing to suffer for a negative outcome in society. The money we do is content marketing and video marketing with clients who are able to pay the rates that we charge and respect us. And then the learning is our R&D. So this is, I like to think of as the future. How are we constantly running experiments that motivate us and that we can learn from? I do have a YouTube channel. You can go to howtomakemovies.ca, that's on the paper, where we post videos like this so that I can talk to 100 of you here, and then other people can continue to watch. This is in our R&D category. Yes, there are marketing benefits, etc. But I was like, look, everyone says things are going online, things are going to social media, and then they don't run any experiments. They come back from a panel at Cannes or Berlin and they talk about how dire the industry is and how things are changing, but they're not actually learning how to change with it. And so we really respect this. We're also working on some digital products with the creative accelerator Zoo, here in Montreal, founded by Guy Laliberté of Cirque du Soleil. So these are also experiments we're running, and the objective with those is to grow towards the future, constantly be learning. And those are the 3 pillars of the company and how I approach that.